Hello everyone, my name is Anna. I was discriminated against all my life because of my golden child sister. My parents always favored my sister, and it was far from subtle. If she accused me of something, they'd believe her and punish me. But if I accused her, even with undeniable proof, they'd give her a lighter punishment and somehow still scold me too. My birthday cake always had to be her favorite flavor. My parents pretended they didn't know I hated it. They always bought her more than me and took us to the places she wanted to go, even when it was supposed to be my day. My sister grew up spoiled and used me as a punching bag. At first, she mostly ignored me, but things got worse when we were teens. She ended up with no friends, and her behavior continued to deteriorate. Did her friends move away or ditch her because she was mean? I don't know. We were never close. My parents boasted about her achievements, but never mentioned any of her issues. Meanwhile, they constantly highlighted my flaws under the guise of teasing. I only realized she had no friends because we went to the same school, and I noticed she was no longer surrounded by anyone. Meanwhile, I was fairly popular. When my sister realized this, she suddenly turned me from an occasional punching bag into someone she needed to take down constantly. She began accusing me and my friends of things. My parents started forbidding me from hanging out with anyone, using excuses like, "They're not good people, according to your sister," or, "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from complete isolation was my extended family. Most of them lived in the same hometown, and I got along well with my cousins, despite some age differences. At one gathering, they invited me to something. I don't remember what. And I sadly replied that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When they asked why, my kid self bluntly said, "Because I'm not allowed to have friends since my sister doesn't have any." That got back to the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart later. I was scolded for lying and grounded for a month, but afterward, my parents gave me a little more freedom. So in the end, it was worth it. My sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of our extended family knowing her social status was too much. She demanded a transfer, and my parents immediately obliged, even though the new school was farther away and cost more. She made friends at the new school, but she never returned to ignoring me. After realizing she could mess with me, and still angry that I had exposed her to the family, she never let me go. My life remained difficult. Her friends would come over and bully me, which my parents brushed off as light teasing. I never invited friends to our house because my parents were terrible hosts, and my sister would accuse them of stealing. My parents would believe her every time. I grew even closer to my cousins, though, since my parents never dared to treat family the same way they treated me. Then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. At one point, we were separated, and he came to find me, visibly disturbed. He told me my sister had been flirting with him. She had come over in skimpy clothes, batting her eyelashes, telling him how awful I was and how great she was. He was creeped out and came straight to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different story, that he had tried to flirt with her, but she had naturally refused because she couldn't do that to me. Guess who my parents believed? My boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I believed him immediately, and for a somewhat petty reason. Remember, I was a teenager, suffering from years of unfair treatment. I was moody, bitter, and resented my sister deeply, and she hated me just as much. With that out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't brought it up before because I didn't think it mattered, but here's the context. My parents were overweight and showed love through food, by giving extra helpings, buying treats, and so on. My sister was also overweight. I, however, was not. I'd always been skinny, likely because my punishments included no snacks or treats. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is. But even back then, my sister was rude and entitled. Her flirting attempts were awkward and ineffective because she had never learned to work for anything. She always demanded, and my parents delivered. She also didn't exactly look like a movie star. Even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe my boyfriend would ever cheat on me with her. My parents eventually forbade me from dating such a horrible boy. I tried to keep seeing him in secret, but it was too difficult, and the relationship ended. I did get another boyfriend, but again, My sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Once again, my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this had happened before, but they decided I was simply incapable of making good choices and that I kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo and Juliet situation and eventually fizzled out. I was eventually labeled a tease in high school because I was okay with making out with boys, but refused to pursue relationships. Thankfully, this never got back to my sister or my parents. During this time, my sister did bring one boyfriend home. He was paraded around with pride, and my parents spent every second praising him and telling me how good he was. They constantly asked why I couldn't be like my sister and find someone like that. Then one day, he stopped showing up. Suddenly, he was a conniving bastard who had tricked my sister. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued. At this point, she had more spending money, and her curfews were much more lenient than mine. She was free to go wherever, whenever. I, on the other hand, wasn't allowed to do anything. If I pointed it out, my parents would say, "It's because she's older." But when I reached the same age, I still didn't get the same freedom. When I pointed that out, they either denied they'd ever said that, or claimed it was because I couldn't be trusted like she could. They used her accusations against my boyfriends and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time went by, and soon it was time for my sister to graduate. She got accepted into a college, not a very prestigious one, and she had no scholarship or notable accomplishments. I don't know which colleges she applied to, because again, only her achievements were shared with me. But I do know her grades weren't great. Every time she got a B, we would celebrate. I usually got better grades, but my parents refused to celebrate. "You always get those," they said. "What's there to celebrate?" Naturally, my parents made a huge fuss when she went off to college and told her they would pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made life easier. She came home every other weekend, and somehow things kept going missing from my room, or she'd come up with new ways to make my life miserable. My curfews remained strict. Eventually, my mom sat me down to talk about my own upcoming graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money left to pay for mine. It would be better, she said, for me to start working immediately after graduation. Maybe after my sister finished university, they could see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for everything, my personal expenses, part of the bills, and rent. I brought up student loans. My mom said yes, except no. They were too caring, she claimed, and given my poor judgment, they would decide whether a college was worth me getting into debt for. I'm not sure how they thought they could stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't even mentioned. They had no clue what my grades were anymore, and never believed in my abilities anyway. I didn't even flinch. I just said, "Okay." My mom clearly hadn't expected that. She kept crying. Maybe she had hoped I'd throw a tantrum so they could use it as an excuse to never pay for my education. But I said nothing except, "I understand your position. Thank you for caring." That was it. Later, my dad tried the same conversation, but I stayed calm and refused to get emotional. You see, after a lifetime of their awful parenting, I had stopped expecting anything from them, especially not support for my education. I knew they would find some excuse to not pay for me. I had never believed they would suddenly help me after my sister graduated, but I had been preparing. Since I barely had a social life and wasn't allowed to go out much, I had spent a lot of time studying. College was my only hope for freedom, and I clung to that. So when the time came, I worked my ass off and earned a scholarship. Not to an Ivy League school or anything prestigious, but a solid program at a decent college, with a full ride. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to sabotage me through my parents, I posted my achievement on social media the same day I told them. I even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going, because they'd have to explain why to the rest of the family. At first, they were even a little proud and bragged about it. But then, I guess my sister got to them, and they suddenly changed their tune. They started asking me if I was really sure. I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, they said I'd probably suffer worse. Obviously, I stuck to my guns. They weren't happy, but they couldn't do anything about it. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could often excuse not going by citing money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them. Meanwhile, my sister had stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate, because if she had, they would have made a whole fanfare out of it. She moved back home, paying no bills or rent. But it's different, my parents said. She started working at the same company as my mom, obviously thanks to my mom pulling strings. This was all presented to me as a point of pride. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I would have done something? Well, my husband is the type who actually does. I'm the meek type, the doormat in every situation. I lie awake at night wishing I had said something clever or stood up for myself. I cry when I'm angry. That's just who I am. But my husband? He claps back immediately. He loves drama and loves to resolve it. He's the kind of person that if he doesn't respond right away, you better start worrying, because that means he's planning something worse. He doesn't forgive and forget. He plots. He's the one who encouraged me to post here. He even wanted to post our story on the nuclear revenge subreddit, but decided what we did wasn't quite nuclear enough. People were baffled that I got together with someone like him, but just because I'm incapable of acting like him due to my upbringing doesn't mean I don't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't. He treats people well, as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we agreed we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget. We'd rather spend on a dream honeymoon in Europe. As for the location, since his family is spread out and mine is mostly in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far away, so we took some long weekend trips to make arrangements. We had some flexibility with work too, so we could stay in my hometown when needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents demanded to meet my fiancé. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but I was struggling. The distance had dulled some of my resentment. A tiny part of me wondered if maybe they weren't that bad. My husband, on the other hand, looked like I'd canceled Christmas when I told him I might let them meet him. I promised I'd at least make sure they were never alone with him. You see, he had been preparing for this. He even bought a high-quality pocket recorder to capture everything. He was thrilled at the idea of refusing my sister's advances, insulting her, and then sharing the audio with the family. So, off he went, alone, excited, to meet them. He came back euphoric. Babe, you won't believe what they said. We can screw them over so bad. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and asked to hear the recording, but he wisely told me I should let him explain first, otherwise I'd misunderstand. So I listened. Apparently, instead of flirting, my parents and sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him and my poor judgment, they made their offer. They said they were willing to pay for our wedding, on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle. Yes, at my wedding. First, in a wedding dress. Their excuse? It's not okay for a younger sister to get married first. So it was only fair if my sister at least got to experience the moment, walking down the aisle, at the venue, in a white gown, getting photographed, and they'd even get her a cake later. Yes, really. At this point, I'll let my husband take over. Hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a guy lurking on pro-revenge, instant karma, and nuclear revenge forums when his beloved is scorned. As much as my wife, yes, wife now, paints me as this quick-witted hero, I'll admit, my neurons short-circuited when her family actually suggested this. Like, this wasn't some offhanded joke. They legit pitched this nonsense like it was some kind of precious gift. Even the Trojans would have rejected this wedding horse. Once my brain rebooted, I had a whole list of insults ready to unleash. But something inside whispered, "String these idiots along." And oh, string them along we did. So I said I needed to think about it, see how my wife, back then fiancé, would react, and then ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a grin on his face and the recording to prove it. I was shocked. The distance had softened my memory of how badly they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go that far. Thankfully, my husband insisting on viewing this through the lens of revenge helped me from spiraling into a bad headspace. We had a blast thinking up ways to screw them over, from the ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother when we settled on a plan. It involved having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, the level-headed brother scolded us for that. While he acknowledged he wouldn't be able to convince us not to retaliate, he at least showed us that something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at risk of getting us sued. So eventually, we settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to do the honors. So here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me, and they were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents and said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he said he didn't see the issue, and not wanting the family to fall apart, he would be down to help them make it happen. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I were surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of everyone. On the other hand, marriage is a big deal, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff, and that way, I'd feel even more pressure not to say anything. Not only would we be public with both families there, but I'd also be grateful for the help they gave. He said my parents looked shocked, and my grown sister literally started skipping with joy, like a kid. So it was accepted. Importantly, my husband also claimed that, due to some bad judgment and past boyfriends, their words, this was all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them. According to my parents, I was distrustful and controlling, and liked to check his phone and such to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing about this plan ever be put in writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, while my husband and I were milking them. Rather than paying for the whole wedding, they stayed low-key at first. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything, including some things that meant a lot to me, like the songs and the color palette. My husband would convince them to let those things go, just to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony in the first place, everything else was fair game, or so they thought. Here's what we did. We'd go to check the drink and menu options, then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it out, sigh and say, "It's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we won't get the best options." Cue my sister demanding that our parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, they'd cover the most expensive option. The same was done with the photographer and flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with the nice ones, and that they'd pay for it. When it came to the wedding dress, we hit a minor snag. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, it wasn't outright hideous, but it wasn't my style, and it wouldn't look good on me. We had planned on saying yes, and then simply not using it. But my mom sent me a text about it, so there'd be proof I said okay, so we had to switch plans. I refused to text back and stood my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they kept communication outside of any traceable medium. We made sure of that by having me reply to my sister when she tried messaging my husband. This solidified the uncontrolling and neurotic image they had of me, thanks to my husband's lies. They believed it and never risked anything in writing. Some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous person is extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor. Oh, and yes, my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted, just to really sell that he was with them. My husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we had hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus our budget on the honeymoon, ended up having this extravagant, expensive wedding and barely spent a dime. We called it payback for emotional damages from my parents. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, was enjoying the whole trick more than planning the actual wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his entire Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws. But here we are. Then the day came. The plan my parents, sister, and husband had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that exact time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it. She'd walk down the aisle before anyone realized what had happened. By the time I heard, it'd be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some leftover fabric from the alterations. My husband took it to my parents' place, where my sister still lives, and showed them the pieces as proof that he had ruined the dress. Then he said he had to rush back to calm me down because I was raging. He told them he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our real security hidden initially. As guests and my parents arrived, they only saw a woman with a list of names to check off. Only after my parents were settled in did we bring out the actual security guy, a tall man who looked like a bodyguard. We instructed him not to let my sister in and promised a generous tip if he kept our instructions confidential. Soon, the moment arrived. My parents got a text that my sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad gave the signal for the ceremony to begin. My bridesmaids had been prepped to follow his lead, so they did, without checking with me. Once they were all in place, my dad stood at the entrance, waiting for me. During this, a friend of mine who wasn't part of the wedding party texted me to get ready, to avoid suspicion in case my husband or bridesmaids started texting. This friend was my husband's ally, just as eager to stir drama as he was, and didn't mind not being part of the wedding party. As soon as my dad took his position and the bridal song began, the doors opened. and I entered. My dad looked stunned to see me. He tried to look behind me but couldn't see the venue entrance from where he was, so he had no idea what had happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was her. He left me with a mumbled, "Something came up." Gasps and confusion filled the room. The friend in on the plan loudly asked, "What happened?" I lied and tearfully said, "He told me it wasn't supposed to be me here." My husband and I had agreed that if my dad abandoned me, I should say that, to make him look as bad as possible. The tears weren't even fake. I was genuinely hurt and trying not to cry. The friend then loudly asked, "What do you mean it wasn't supposed to be you?" So that everyone around could hear and start whispering. Then she said, "I'll go check," and ran off, exactly as we had planned. Her job was to create chaos with security and prevent my dad from returning to stop the ceremony. Eventually, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to do that. His desperate run toward me actually made me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people murmured about what had happened. Some guests even left to check. When I reached my husband, all was well. He comforted me, joking that my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar, and reassured me that he'd deal with my parents for what they did. We got married without any further issues. My parents never came back. I noticed a lot of people leaving and returning during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone whispered in my husband's ear, and he went outside. He came back later with a thunderous expression, but whispered to me that he needed to go hide, before he broke character and started laughing. It worked. Here's the summary I got from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband afterward. My sister arrived in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in, as we had agreed. He told her she must be at the wrong venue, because there was already a bride. Yes, we tipped the security guard very well, as promised. My dad tried threatening him with the police, claiming he'd never heard of him, so he couldn't possibly be working there. The security guy calmly agreed to call the police, since he was hired by us and was just doing his job. Realizing it would be too late to stop anything that way, my dad demanded the guard let my sister in. That's when my friend came over, started shouting and insulting my sister, and asking what was going on, basically stalling. My mom arrived shortly after, followed by others. By then, their plan had completely unraveled. All my parents could do now was damage control. But it was too late. Everyone who learned what they were trying to pull off was horrified. People started screaming and berating them. The three of them, my parents and sister, naturally claimed it wasn't a secret and tried to blame my husband. When he was called over, my husband put on his best confused expression and denied everything. To quote him, "Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss." He denied ever agreeing to such a ridiculous plan. When they insisted he had, he asked, "Do you have any proof?" And of course, they didn't. All the texts they could show were about normal wedding planning details. Nothing even hinted at their ridiculous request. My sister started screaming and crying, then sat on the floor kicking her legs like a toddler. My dad looked like he wanted to hit my husband, but security and several guests held him back. They claimed they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. He laughed and replied, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then he asked again, "Why would I ever agree to something so messed up?" He ripped into them for being terrible parents and made it clear he wasn't going to let their lies ruin our wedding. Then he returned to me. No one believed them. The venue had security cameras, but they wouldn't show me the footage since it was for security purposes only. However, plenty of guests filmed parts of it on their phones. Watching my parents and sister get torn apart by everyone who came out to witness the drama was delightful. After years of being accused and never believed, seeing them finally get a taste of their own medicine was one of the best wedding gifts I could have asked for. My mother was crying. My dad kept turning purple and white, and my sister was still on the floor, sobbing and screaming. They kept insisting my husband was in on it, but people kept asking, then where's the proof? And why would he agree to this? They had no answers. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice. My dad had to drag my sister out. She refused to leave the ground. People said nothing to me that night, probably to spare my feelings. And maybe because I was the bride, and not just a guest for once, it felt like everyone went out of their way to be kind, excited, and positive about everything. My husband says all the expensive food and drinks helped keep people in a good mood too. We had a blast. My husband only kept up the fake angry face for a short while before breaking out in huge smiles again. Afterward, we went to the hotel to rest before heading off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents tried to pay for our plane tickets, but we declined. We were worried they might cancel the flight or sabotage it somehow. Since then, the three of them have tried to contact me. I've refused to answer their calls because my husband insisted we keep a paper trail. Smart move, because eventually my sister sent me a message. I won't repeat what she said because it was unhinged and didn't make much sense. The important parts: she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake who fooled them for months, claimed she was sure he'd cheat on me, and even suggested he was already cheating on me with her yep. She said that. My husband took my phone, screenshotted the call logs, her messages, and some texts from my parents demanding I pick up the phone. Then he sent it all to our extended family group chat. He also included screenshots of threatening and insulting messages they had sent to him. He kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" act, and even threatened legal action for defamation and harassment. In the group chat, he wrote a dramatic message pleading for help. He claimed I was being harassed by my parents and sister, even during our honeymoon, and begged the family to intervene. He finished with a request. Please don't share our location with them. I don't want my sister showing up to our honeymoon suite claiming I agreed to sleep with her. Our family rallied around us. They promised to handle it, and since then, we've had peace. My husband's only regret? That my sister didn't try to show up so he could call her out again. We'll see how long the peace lasts.